The most famous cyclist came from a village down in Fujian on the south coast. Susong, there he is, one of the great polymaths of the Song dynasty. They don't come much more poly than him. He was an engineer, astronomer, scholar, poet, but he also wrote treatises on mineralogy and zoology and pharmacology. It's real left brain, right brain stuff, isn't it? But their education enabled them to be both artistic and scientific, endlessly creative and endlessly curious. He reminds you of some of the great figures of the Renaissance in Europe. I suppose you could say that he's the Chinese Leonardo, but to put it more correctly, Leonardo is the Western Susong. This is Susong's pet project, an astronomical clock. His proud hometown has just rebuilt a working replica, 45 feet high. Its mechanism, a water clock, driven by an endless chain drive. Standing like a captain on the bridge of a boat, 24 hours a day, and periodically topping the water level up of the tanks. There you go. Wonderful. Imagining this little typhoon ringing out the hours, 24 hours a day for the citizens as they go about their business. It's like the Song dynasty's Big Ben. Scientific exploration thrived in the Song, in part because there was no theological straitjacket holding back speculation on the nature of time and the universe. See the goddess of mercy. It's real women's cult here. Isn't this fantastic? It's a people's temple. Taoism and Buddhism were the official cults of the Song Empire. But religion wasn't an area where the government intruded into people's lives. They were always watchful of foreigners. The Song, just like the Tang, had many Muslim and Christian communities, which still survive. And in Kaifeng, so did the last of the Chinese Jews. This is Chinese Rosh Hashanah. Under the Song, the population of China doubled. 100 million in the year 1000. It was 200 million by the late 1200s. More than a third of the world's people. And with a huge urban population, just like the British in the 19th century, the Chinese invented many games and sports, including what they called kickball. We British, of course, pride ourselves on having invented the world's greatest game. In a sense that the rules of modern football were established in Britain, Sheffield to be precise, in the 1860s, that's true. But as usual in this story, the Chinese got there first. Football was massive in the Song dynasty 1,000 years ago. So I suppose you could say it's the Chinese word, 苏州味道的 football's coming home.
没有，你要跟他拿一封信的，知道吗？你开 OKU account 要跟他拿一封信的。
It wasn't a mass sport, of course, there was no such thing then. But football in the Song was a spectator sport with clubs, handbooks, rules and fans.
等一下，要加注车。
The Emperor's not arrived yet. It's 这里啊，往里一传，球进禁区。 注意，有机会了，起脚打门！
Different ways of playing the game in the Song Dynasty. The favourite one, the goals were posts up 10 metres high, and coloured net hung between them with a hole through which you had to shoot the ball.
And of course, being China, ethical conduct was vital. In Song football, it was play up, play the game. Abusing the referee was un-Confucian. And professional fouls unthinkable. Well, almost. Football wasn't just for the elite. China was opening up socially, and that went for government too.
There was definitely a lot of social mobility going on during the song. The social classes were in flux in some sense. People from all sorts of backgrounds could engage more closely, who were more sensitive towards the social situation. They became involved in government too. New schools for learning opened up, and academies were established as well that sought to teach the classics and also to foster good character.
It was the great age of Confucian social values, and how they set about creating that ethos is startlingly modern.
As you can see, it's Freshers Week here in Henan University in Kaifeng. The story of universities goes back a long way in China, much further back than in the West.
买不完的，买不完的。2929没有，我都买 iBox 就其他的有啊。
In 1069, the emperor expanded the student body from 1,000 to more than 3,000. They had financial support, a board and lodging, and the big idea was to draw in students from the provinces, talented youngsters, perhaps even from middling or lower families, to come into the metropolis for the best education. And the goal, as the emperor put it himself, for the morality of the culture. As educationalists say today, the ethos is the thing.
For the examinations, the students studied literature, history, and Confucian classics. The emperor and his advisors were looking for tomorrow's administrators to govern a harmonious Confucian society.
There was a new class of literati who previously perhaps didn't have the chance to sit through the examination system, but now they had. Confucian teachings were really at the core of these civil examinations. And because they had such an important role to play in those examinations, and that so many people took examinations, it meant that it was a way for Confucian ideas to really permeate into society. You could say that it was a meritocratic society where excellence in learning was really prized.
Meritocratic, but not universal.
智商呢，大的没有咯，小的只有块8钱。
Educational revolution. Women. But ironically, it's through the writings of a woman that we get one of the best insights into the world of the song. These students are studying her work in today's university in Kaifeng. She's the poet, Li Jingjia.
所以呢，有人就讲，你看你们的回首，哪是贵族大家出身的这个小姐应该做风度倜傥不羁的风度，领清照，国务农园愁永正，开始。
总之就是2929这个字没有了，只有上面买到快8千小罢了。你问他要不要？不要啊，等一下也是没有了的，一点都没有的。
Qingjiang. She's one of China's greatest poets. Her father had encouraged her to write poetry from an early age and attend male poetic gatherings. And she was already famous and in print when she was 17, when she married a student from the university here in Kaifeng. And they spent a lot of time here in the great old Buddhist temple in the middle of town, wandering its courtyards, making rice paper rubbings of its inscriptions. But recent feminist criticism here in China is giving us another view of her altogether. The strains within her marriage in a society dominated by men. The ambitions of a brilliant woman to find a voice that was not only interior and personal, but public and political.
She was criticised by some at the time for saying things. For writing poetry, women were not supposed to write poetry. This was, a man thing. And poetry was one of the major ways of social interaction amongst men. You would go and drink a cup of wine, you would compose poetry with each other. You would say 2 lines of a poem and I would give you the next 2 lines.
然后啊，那些 Golden Magnum 的2929 iBox 啊，你问他 iBox 2929这个字就是没有，其他的有，只有2929没有。如果要我就下单，不要我就没有下单。
A lot of women wrote poetry.
A lot of women wrote poetry, yes.
Being published is a different matter.
That's right, yes, yes.
Paradoxical period for women, isn't it? There's so many social advances.
这
Women's
些
voice
字要早，我只是昨
strongly,
天
perhaps for the first
然后
time.
买
And yet,
这样
foot binding is starting to
10点
become widespread.
10点没有了。
It's very mixed because women become crucial to this political notion of loyalty. They've had their equal part to play in that. But at the same time, they have also been, their rights that they have previously had, their economic rights, have been taken away from them.
So
有啊
women could
有
be
啊，你
highly
先给我
educated,
的嘛，好龙，
but to play their
应
part
该
in
是他自己
male-led
买咯，他
Confucian
要的好
society,
龙，是
women
他
were
的
to
咯，
cultivate
这样买
loyalty
法
to
是他
father,
的。
husband,
啊，
and
汉
state
总是
to ensure
你那边
national
写了是吧？
cohesion. So wrote leading conservative, the historian Sima Guan. But in the late 11th century, right
那
up to the time,
个
old
1
way
块
of
2
doing
块多
things
多那
was
些要吗？
challenged.
要我就写给你，等一下先，这里有多
The
少？
leading light in the reformers was a man called Wang Unshe, a southerner who'd spent 20 years in local government. Wang pushed reforms across the board. Fairer taxes, government loans for the poor, new degrees in law and science, breaking down class barriers in the name of economic efficiency. With growing threats on its frontiers, the state had an enormous defense budget. One thought a more open society would make the economy work better. The Confucian classics, the old way of doing things, were put in their place. They had to have practical application. And of course, the old-fashioned Confucian bureaucrats were horrible.